Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment of our program brought to you by Calhoun's. The Southeastern Conference Tournament will be played in Nashville. But there are 9 Calhoun's locations right here in East Tennessee where you can see all the games in a comfortable seat with great ribs or barbecue to eat and with craft brews to wash it all down. Calhoun's, the taste of Tennessee when you're watching the Vols or anybody else in the SEC tournament this week. Do it at Calhoun's. Okay, the Vols were projected as a #1 seed by Joe Lunardi and Jerry Palm as of yesterday going into the game. Then they lost. So they're not going to be a #1 seed now. Lunardi, it was said, dropped them to a #2, but as of about 9:55 or 10:55 this morning, his numbers, his latest bracketology wasn't online. Jerry Palm's is, however. Let's take a look at what Jerry Palm has in terms of his top seeds. And you can see he has dropped Tennessee to a #2 seed. And, interestingly, it's been looking like Tennessee would either be the #1 in Kansas City or the #2 in Louisville. Tennessee, Kentucky would flip-flop there. Now he's changed it. He's got Tennessee as the 2 seed in Washington, D.C., along with Purdue and Kansas, who you've already seen this year in the #1 seed over there, Virginia. Whereas if Tennessee somehow comes back and gets a 1 seed, it would probably be down there, Kansas City. He's moved Kentucky up into the Louisville zone there. But at any rate, let's take a look at rankings, if we will. I think that's next. There are a lot of people freaking out because Tennessee was ranked 5th this week and they wanted a higher ranking. It has nothing to do with seeding, nothing. Because if you're 1 through 4, you should be a 1 seed. If you're 5 through 8, that would mean a 2 seed, 9 through 12, a 3 seed, 13 through 15, a 4 seed. I looked at the last 4 tournaments, the top 15 teams every year. In 2018, 10 of the top 15 teams, their seed did not match what their poll rank was. For example, Tennessee last year was ranked 13th. That means they should have been a 4 seed, but they got a 3 seed. 6 out of 15, 9 out of 15, 6 out of 15. The seed doesn't match the rank. Don't worry about the national rankings. Okay, now let's take one last look here at which way's better. All right, so let's say Kentucky's a #1 seed. All right, this is Jerry Palm's view right now. This is Kentucky's path and Tennessee's path. Now let's just say, for the sake of argument, Tennessee beats Kentucky in Nashville and they flip-flop them. Now, more than likely, Tennessee would get the 1 seed in Kansas City. But anyway, just for the sake of argument, a 1 seed versus a 2 seed. Kentucky's pod, the first 2 rounds, would be in Columbus, Ohio. Tennessee, right now, he's got them in Jacksonville. Best team that Kentucky could play in the first round, #8, Iowa State. Tennessee's got them playing #7, Louisville, who you've already played. Second round, Kansas State would play Kentucky. Tennessee, the highest-rated team you could play, would be #3, Purdue. Then Kentucky's moving to the Louisville Regional. #3, Michigan, and #2, Duke are the 2 top teams they could play. If Tennessee goes to Washington, D.C., Sweet 16, the top 2 teams they could play, #4, Kansas, who they've already played, #1, Virginia. All right, here's your question. Which is better? What's the better path? 2 or 1? 1 is 10.5 hours away, whereas actually, Louisville is 3.5 hours away. Washington, 8 hours? 8 hours away? You look at the teams you'd play. I don't know if Duke has Zion Williamson. I think I'd rather play Virginia than Duke. It's questionable. But anyway, the gist is you played Louisville and Kansas before. Mark, it was a long time ago, but would you rather have that path with 2 teams you've played, or would you rather face teams you haven't played?
Looking at, I don't like having to play the second team, playing Louisville and Kansas twice, having beaten Louisville. But Kansas is injured where they were when Tennessee first played them. I'd rather have, with that said, I'd rather have that setup being #2 than playing a Kansas State, who I think is really good, playing a Michigan, who's really good, and then assuming that Zion is back. I'd rather play a Duke. I'm not a big Duke believer. I think Virginia scares me more. But with that said, I'd rather have the 2 seed than having that #1, even though it's in Louisville.
Okay. I'd rather be the 2 and play Louisville and Kansas, because if you look at Rick Barnes' record in SEC play, when he plays a team in a rematch, he's 8-0 the second time around. Plus, Kansas is not as good because of the injury, and Louisville has a tendency to choke late in the game. So I'd rather be the 2 seed. Yeah.
Those matchups are tough, though. You look at Purdue and Virginia; those are 2 teams that can shoot the ball, and those are 2 we saw yesterday at Auburn. When teams get open looks, they're going to knock them down, and those are 2 teams that can do that. And then you add Virginia too, the defense that they kind of play. Last year, obviously Virginia losing to the 16 seed, but this Virginia team, a lot better offensively than that team. And if Tennessee ends up playing Kansas again, they match up pretty well. Noah Azubuike for the Jayhawks. That road with that 2 seed, I mean, you look at how Tennessee has played against top 30 Ken Palm opponents. It's been a little shaky the back half of the season. I definitely want that 1 seed, even if you're,
See, I look at Duke and Michigan. I don't see a huge amount of difference. But to me, it's would you rather be in Washington or Louisville? I'd rather be in Louisville if that's the way it worked out. But more than likely, if Tennessee's a number 1, it's Washington number 2 or Kansas City number 1. I'd rather be Washington than Kansas City. But I would rather face the teams that I've already seen. But you're the coach, Isaiah. Which would you rather do?
I like Louisville. I mean
the one seed.
Yeah, I like the
Kentucky.
1 seed. Yeah, for sure. I mean, we hadn't played Duke. They might have Zion. Whatever. I mean, we should get a lot of fans down there.
You're very confident.
Whatever that one.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Wait a minute now.
What do you do? I mean, the thing is, we're gonna have a lot more fans travel there. I think that does mean a lot. You look at our home games and you look at our road games and how lopsided they can be, especially when we're playing a really good team, tournament caliber team. So, yeah, I like going with the 1 seed. Plus, that probably means we won the SEC tournament too. So
now, one interesting thing, and we'll talk about winning the SEC tournament in a minute. But one thing to keep in mind, and David, we were talking about this before the show. These guys, Lunardi and Palm, they get a lot of credit for picking the correct field every year. If you do this seriously and do it by the numbers, you can probably at home pick 63 or 64 out of the top 68. Where they're not accurate, because how could you be? The tournament committee changes every year. Seeding. So the idea that, well, he's got us as number 2, so we're number 2. If you watch those post-tournament selection shows every year and you see Jay Billis and Dick Vitale going nuts, it's usually because some good team got a worse seed than they should have or some bad team got a better seed than they should have. So if I'm a Tennessee fan right now, yeah, it looks like number 2. There's nothing to say you don't get a number 1. And as I do every year, if you think, well, there's no way they'll get a drop down, yeah, there is. I would be looking at a possible number 3 too, depending on how Nashville goes. Stuff can happen when it gets in that committee. And the other thing, they're using new net rankings this year instead of the RPI, the quadrant 1, quadrant 2. We're not exactly sure how this is going to shake out this first go around. So just 2 for now. 1's not out of question. Neither's a 3. Keep it in mind. When we come back, we're going to talk a little football. Spring practice, and we got a lot more basketball, some Holly Warwick stuff. Come on back on the Sports Source.